continue the Shir in Gemara. Continuing the Gemara, Edyos. Remember that this is in the Sechta Gemara that speaks about the select, chosen words, discussions that were held by the rabbis of the Gemara on the day that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was crowned as Nasi. The Gemara says, we mentioned this, we started to speak about the fact that in the Gemara you have debates by Hebrew law. For these debates you have generally one rabbi holding one way, that an item is permissible, the second one says it's forbidden. Then, when you have this debate, we have to have a determination to resolve what we are supposed to do and we're supposed to follow. For this, there is a set pattern in the Gemara. The Gemara itself decides which one of the rabbis generally is right. However, one thing is irrefutable. If you have a case of a majority against one, you have a group of rabbis called the Chachamim, plural, against one rabbi, anyone, no matter how great he is, the rule is always that halacha kirabim. The wording is yachid v'rabim, halacha kirabim. An individual against the multitude, one rabbi against many, we always follow the majority because this is the law in the Torah. The posek in the Torah which says Zachay Rab Lahatos, you must bend towards the side of the plurality. So the Gemara asks now, if that's the case, why do we find discussions in the Gemara, debates between a majority and an individual? If we say always follow the majority, then why spend the time to learn the opinion of the individual? It could be misleading. We might err. We might forget who said what. Isn't it easier to make one statement in the Gemara? The Chachamim say a certain thing is permissible, finished, or it's forbidden. Why discuss the other side if the other side is only an individual and the law remains like the Chachamim? It's a very good question. The Gemara says, fine question. The answer is, we must have both statements as a lesson for the future. Because later on there might rise up one person, a later generation, who will state the law. For example, a certain item that we have in the past, the rabbis, the Gemara say it's forbidden. One person, one leader might rise up in a later generation and say, I say that this item is permissible. And they will say, why? He'll say, because kach kibalti, this is what I was taught by my rabbi. Nothing can be stronger than that. In that case, they would then be able to show him that you received it from your rabbi who was a single person, an individual one, or who followed the opinion of one, and that was an error. We must have a statement shown that there is such a statement as this person claims, but it originates from a yachid, an individual. The law does not remain like that. This is a lesson for all time. However, we do have a possibility, a very remote possibility, of course, where the majority rule could be nullified. For example, you have a Bezdin, Chachamim, not necessarily the rabbis of the Gemara. You have it any time. Any time in later generations, the leading rabbis of the Jews decide that there's a certain restriction that's very important because there's some type of a mitzvah is in jeopardy. We must build a fence around it to protect it, so therefore we state henceforth this item is forbidden, though till now it was permissible. Once these rabbis declare this new decree remains forbidden because they are the Chachamim. They have a right, they have the authority. Next generation, if they want to remove this decree, how can they do it? There's a majority prior to them. It is possible only to be removed by a new majority. New majority means later rabbis of a later generation could remove the decree of the former one if they outnumber. If in number they outnumber the ones of the court that issued the decree before, They must be greater in number. They must be greater also in knowledge. Greater in knowledge, too. Greater rabbis, greater chachamim, and greater in number. Chachma u'minyan. In wisdom and in number, they must be greater. And then they could remove a decree of a majority. And of course, that is very difficult because we know for a fact that as generations go on, the wisdom decreases. There is a definite decline in the greatness of rabbis. There's no question about it. Today's generation does not contain rabbis as great as the previous generation. The one that lived before us, not as great as two generations before that. As you keep going back, even hundreds of years ago, the days of the great rabbis, the Aharon, and too, they were leading lights, luminaries that wrote the commentaries in the Gemara, and they feared to tread where the previous rabbis had spoken on any topic. The ones before them, known as the Rishonim, the first commentaries, their word is accepted as irrevocable. They cannot argue against those prior to them. The same as we find in the Gemara. The Mishnah was composed by the Tanoim, the first rabbis of the Gemara. The Gemara itself explains the Mishnah was composed by the Amoraim. You will never find a case where an Amora, it's a rabbi from the Gemara, as great as he is, could ever overrule a Tana who came before. It is impossible. He came later, he is considered inferior, subordinate to those who came before. That's why it's very rare that you could find this case come true, where a new court should arise to overrule an old court prior to them, because they must be greater in number and in wisdom. We do find one exception nowadays. We have an unusual amount of wisdom existing apparently. In the new court that's been formed, they call themselves the Reformed rabbis. And they consider themselves so great that they can overrule all the prior courts, prior rabbis of the recent past, long ago past. Even the Gemara becomes nil against them, compared to them, even as far as the Chumash itself, they call the Bible. When we discuss this case with them, you ask them, how can you teach, how can you preach to your followers customs, regulations that are against the Gemara, against the rabbis of the past, against the rabbis of the Torah itself, or even go so far as against Moshe Rabbeinu, who stated in the Chumash that Chazar is forbidden. And they reply, of course, that this is an advanced mentality. They live according to the times, according to the generation. They have the right, they have the authority to overrule all prior to them, because they say that as time goes on, scientists become greater and more advanced, and so too do rabbis. These Reformed rabbis are superior to all those prior to them. And this is said in a very serious vein. The fact is, these Reformed rabbis have conventions where they have only tray food, deliberately to show their so-called superiority. The Gemara hints at this. We're deviating for a moment to show the poison of these Reform rabbis who get their degree by graduating Reform school and who poison the minds of their innocent followers. The Gemara says that Rabbi Meir, we once mentioned this before, we had this many times, the story in the Gemara, but Meir was Meir Balhanes, one of the great rabbis of the Gemara, who was the student of Rabbi Akiva, was traveling with two other rabbis, and they came to an inn. They had to place their monies for safekeeping with the owner of the inn. And Rabbi Meir said, before we give him our money to trust him, I must know his name. There's a lot to a person's name. And the other rabbis said, we don't judge a person by his name. What does a name got to do with the character of a person? But Meir said, I still insist, I maintain that a name means everything. They asked the man his name, and he said his name is Kedar. The Meir said, that's bad, because in the case of the flood, generation of the flood, it's a kidor tapuchos hema. It is a generation that is contrary to good, evil generation. So his name is Kidor, it's a sign in the Torah that he has a bad name, therefore we do not trust him. The result was obvious, a long story of how he did try to steal the money, and Abraham tricked him, his wife, into returning it. But the lesson there is, why does the Gemara teach us that story? What is the lesson in that story? Who are we speaking about? Abraham really issued a warning for the future, telling us there will come a time when there will be a group, an individual or group, that will go contrary to everything that is holy. They cannot be trusted, they should not be trusted. They should be expelled. And what kind of a group is that? The Reformed rabbis who are called Kidor. Kidor, their greatness, they go according to the generation. Kidor. We live according to the times. Generation and times demand a change in law and religion, and therefore they say they can supersede, overrule all the courts, Jewish courts and Jewish law of the past. Ameya said, Ameya Bahanes testified that Kidor is a fraud. Reformed are liars, they are traitors to the religion, and they must be completely ignored and brought out to the light, to the open. This is what the Gemara tells us now, that in case there is one who tries to speak against the Chacham, the majority, then we must show him the error of his ways, even if he is sincere. Of course, if he is sincere, he will accept. The Gemara goes on to say, we say Gemara, now we're speaking about Mishnah, Edyos, and all Mishnayos. But it's considered part of Shas. The Gemara says that there are 5 items that each one of these lasted or lasts for 12 months. A period of 12 months for each one of these 5 individual items. One was the sentence meted out, the punishment for the generation of the flood. The time of Noach, a tzadik, when the world was so completely corrupt, so filled with sin and crime, that it was decided from heaven that the entire world must be destroyed and rebuilt through the sole survivors, Noach and his family. The world was so filled with crime, if we take account of the crimes committed then, they are very mild little pussycats compared to the generation we live in. Let's be very proud that we are now living in a generation that has gone beyond the chamos and crime of the generation of the flood. Fortunately, we have today a guarantee, a vow by Hashem, He will not destroy the world. Otherwise, if not for that vow, not for the sign of the rainbow, which is the symbol of the vow, this world would long be deluged by a tidal wave that would have destroyed it. And we're still on a decline. The world is still getting darker and darker. The darkness is increasing and multiplying very quickly. But, of course, that is a definite sign we're getting close to Mashiach's coming, will bring back the light to this dark world. At that time, the punishment for the generation of the flood was the one that lasted for exactly 12 months, a total of 365 days, which is not our calendar. There's a lunar calendar, which is 353 or 354 days, depending upon the types of months. And the solar calendar, that's the sun, 365 days and 6 hours. A difference of about 11 days between these two calendars. The Gemara says that that generation was punished for a period of 12 months because they lived like Goyim, the evil of Goyim, therefore they were punished according to the non-Jewish calendar, the solar calendar, 365 days in which the world was systematically destroyed by this flood, a combination of ice-cold water, first the ice-cold water coming from above, and then the boiling waters that came from the bowels of the earth, until the entire world was destroyed. Just those in the ark remained alive to bring new life to this planet. Those in the ark, and a few that were standing outside the ark, but very close to the ark itself. A couple of giants, a couple of animals that couldn't fit into the ark because of their unusual size. And also, naturally, the fish under the water, deep under the waters remained cool. It was only the surface that was boiling. But this mishpat, this judgment, lasted for a period of 12 months. This is the first one of the 5 items that lasted 12 months. Second one, and of course, by the way, it's important to note, the Medrash says that the major crime, paramount sin of that generation was that they worshipped the stars, the moon, the mazalos, the signs of the zodiac. This they used as their idol worship. And because of that, there was a curse placed upon all of these heavenly bodies. For those 12 months, they did not serve at all. There was no sun, moon, or stars, or mazalos to serve. There was a moratorium placed on the entire heavenly body, the universe, a period of 12 months cursed by this flood itself, to show that it is not the heavenly bodies that rule the world. They should be taught there is only one creator, one who supervises, one who created, the one who maintains all of creation. Next case was the punishment, the judgment for the Egyptians, who kept the Jews in slavery, and who refused to release them from this bondage, and therefore they were punished with the 10 plagues. This punishment lasted for a period of exactly 12 months. The time that the first one began until the time that the last one ended was just 12 months, because this is called a judgment for the wicked. Judgment for the wicked is a 12-month period. Third case is the case of Edyos, who was a tzadik, and who was subjected to a very serious test. We once had this very much in detail in the Navi Shiur, where he lost his family, he lost his wealth, and then he was pressured further by being subjected to a physical torture, a type of leprosy, skin disease, boils. He suffered a period of 12 months and did not lose his faith. He retained his faith, and of course he was rewarded afterwards with double the amount of wealth and good that he possessed prior to that. Fourth case is the judgment of Gog uMagog. Gog uMagog is a term that is used, a very mysterious term. We speak about Milchemes Gog uMagog, the war of Gog uMagog, and this war deals with the future. It is written that before Mashiach comes, there will be this major world battle of Gog uMagog, which will take place then. This will be the final battle, when finally we'll have the Geula Shlema. What this battle means, there are some who say that this means Gog uMagog, the Gematria 70, that all 70 nations will rise up against Israel to do battle against it. If that's the case, we see Gog uMagog multiplied in the UN, all rising up against Israel today, tiny Israel, together with the Arabs, together with the Yagush nations, Africa, the third world, fifth world. Every one of them has gotten up to a point where they make the number 70 look small. But these 70, of course, represent the basic 70 nations with splinter groups. You have some Congolese tribes, though they represent a membership in the UN, but the entire thing is fraudulent. Everyone knows what their real value is. They might as well put up the rest of the creatures in the jungles, too, as members in the UN, which would be a definite improvement over the members they have now. Basically, there are 70 nations, at least 70. At that time, there'll be a war which will last for 12 months. This means a period of suffering. It's called Chevlei Mashiach. Just as there is suffering before the birth of a child, so too the birth of the Geula, the birth of the redemption, birth of freedom and light, and a brilliant, glorious future for the Jews, will be preceded by this 12-month period of suffering with Gog and Magog. Benadel says that this is not the true meaning of Gog and Magog, this is not the true suffering. The real meaning of Gog and Magog is it will be a battle, it will be a very big war. But more important than a physical war, it will be a war of kafida, a war of the spreading of atheism, spreading of false beliefs, even among the religious people, the Bali Amunah, who will cease to really believe. There will be doubts in many basic rules of faith. Well, this we see today. We see that today some giants have fallen victim to these false beliefs. Beliefs in space, beliefs in age. It is a definite fact that the foundation of belief, Rosenfeld states this very emphatically, this is a point that is not negotiable. There's no discussion possible on this. This is absolute fact, 100% foundation of Emunah. The first rule in Emunah is the age of this world. World meaning not just this planet. The age of the heaven and earth. Heaven and all the planets and the earth. The age is 5,736 years have gone by since creation, and prior to that there was nothing. Certainly there were no dinosaurs, and there were no fossils, and no rocks of any kind, and no meteors, and no collisions of planets, and so forth, neither on the planet Earth, nor on the moon, or any other planet. And all this talk about millions of years, or billions of years, and so on, is absolute heresy, absolute atheism. This is 100% defeata. And the tragedy is that the scientists today have injected a seed of doubt into the minds of even the religious people. You will find statements in some of the press written by religious scientists and advocating, giving strength to these false beliefs. And this, the Benadel said, will be the true tragic war that will precede the coming of Mashiach. When people who till then were pure, possessed a perfect faith, will begin to fall victim, their emunah will begin to wane, to decline, to reach a point that is so weak they may fall completely victim, become casualties of this battle. Benadel said that even though I scream, I cry about this future tragedy, I know there will be very few who will listen to me. But we today, who have received this warning by the Benadel, we today who are aware of this, we must strengthen ourselves not to fall victim to. Though we see so many falling by the wayside, leading authorities in Hebrew law, and Hebrew lore, and Hebrew knowledge, still we must remain strong and steadfast and be zecher to go through this battle and come out unscathed. Retain our emunah solidly, to know that what the Torah tells us is true regardless of what the scientists or others claim, no matter how their proof seems to be close to fact. The fact is that nothing is true if it goes against the word of the Torah. This is the main battle of Gog and Magog, the Benadel says, before the coming of Mashiach. Ashrei to that person who can hold out in this battle, remain pure in Emunah. Of course, I don't want to go into the very, very controversial topic, yet which certainly the Arizal directed his words in reference to, because he stated this so many times. Rosenfeld too states it, the controversy about the sun and the earth. The fact that scientists, without mentioning just once the name of Copernicus, adding the words Yimach Shemayim Zechrei, that his name be erased forever, because he's the one who brought the courses into the world, which today is accepted by a vast majority of Jews, even among religious ones. He stated falsely that the earth rotates and revolves around the sun. Chas v'shalom to repeat those words, because the Torah states clearly, the Zohar Kodesh, the Menachem Mendel Schneerson state many times over and over again, as the Torah says, the earth is stationary, everything revolves around the earth, because according to Kabbalah, if you get the proper geographical diagram of creation, you see where the earth is the center of all creation. Around the earth you have the rest of the planets, and even the heavens also around and circle the earth. That this one nekuda, this one central dot, is absolutely stationary. Everything revolves around it. So the moon is in orbit, the sun is in orbit around the earth, stars, everything is in orbit around the earth. The one thing that is stationary is the smallest of all items, but the central focal point, the reason for creation. Everything is only secondary. Hashem created all the universe and the heavens because of this tiny planet Earth, and this tiny planet because of the tiny nation of Jews and the tiny few who will retain their faith. It's for the sake of the faith that this world exists. Tzadik be'emunasa yichya, kol mitzvaysav emunah. The entire Torah is based on that one word, faith. And therefore, again, our faith must remain unshaken, despite all claims by scientists, religious scientists so-called, and the belief, true faith, that the earth is stationary and everything revolves around it. For this, of course, a person who states this nowadays is called a fool. A fool to try to debate this with the great minds of the scientists, Yimach Shemam. The answer is, again and again, as we will have very shortly, in this Gemara, we have that immortal statement by one of the greatest rabbis of the Gemara: I would much rather be called a fool all my life, my entire life on earth, not to be called a Rasha, an evil person, chas v'shalom by Hashem, even for one moment. It's better to be called a fool by people, by mortals, but maintain the faith so as to come before Hashem pure in emunah. The next item, the fifth item, which lasts 12 months, the Gemara says, is the judgment of the wicked after they die. Every person, regardless of how good he is or how bad he is, must die eventually. Eventually means some die as early as at birth, prior to birth, some live a number of years, some live a long life, 70 years, up till 120 years. But nobody can live forever. Every person must eventually die, so whether he lives more or less, it makes no difference. The end is that he must leave, he must depart from this world. And when he departs from this world, there's no escape from the ultimate judgment. He must appear before the heavenly court, and there to give an account of himself. You cannot mention one single name of a person in the past hundreds of years at least who is still alive, who got out of this world alive. Everyone has died. The Gemara says there are only 9 people in history who did not actually die physically, but they too had to leave this world. Even those 9 went to Gan Eden without dying. They were such great tzaddikim. But every person must die. Every person in the past has died, Every person alive today definitely will die. That is a guarantee no one can evade. The Gemara says, in this judgment, if a person is wicked, if he is found to be a Rasha, Rasha means evil, decision in heaven at his trial is he's a Rasha, his judgment in Gehenna is also 12 months. This 12-month period is the sentence of a Rasha in Gehenna. Naturally, this is a misleading sentence term, or is used as a misleading term by many who are not fully acquainted with the background of this statement, with the additional information concerning this statement. There are some people who believe, inclined to believe, that this word Rasha means the most evil person in existence, and his sentence in Gehenna is 12 months, and then he goes to Gan Eden automatically, so that no person can ever suffer more than 12 months after he passes away. There's nothing further from the truth than that, because this statement states clearly his sentence is 12 months in Gehenna. Gehenna is not the worst suffering. There is much worse suffering by the person who dies before he gets to Gehenna. A lot of items that are so much worse than Gehenna that it is a privilege for a person to even go to Gehenna after he dies, rather than to suffer through the many other items that precede Gehenna. Chas v'sholom. Those, of course, are listed in many Sfarim that speak about it, especially in the Sifrei Kabbalah, which describe them thoroughly. We can't go into that because it's not that it's an unpleasant topic, Chas v'sholom. It's a very, very pleasant topic for those who believe. Those who are Zechet Emunah, with that Emunah, they will be saved from Gehenna. It's important to know about this, to believe in it, because then you can find ways of avoiding this, of escaping it. Best means of escape is simply tshuva. Person who does tshuva, person who gives tzedakah tatfa mimava, tzedakah saves from death, not of this world, because people who gave tzedakah still die. It saves from the death in the future world, which means the word death is applied to Gehenna. Punishment there, that's what tzedakah can do to save a person from. Especially tzedakah means meiser. A person who gives his 10% regularly, strictly, and never fails. A person never fails, because one time he fails, it could undo that chain. It must be an unending chain. That can save a person from Gehenna, in addition to many other items. And of course, the greatest item for saving a person from Gehenna, in one infallible case, is his attachment in pure, implicit faith in the tzadik emes. Because the tzadik emes is more powerful than all of the angels of Gehenna. He is the one individual that has the power to overrule the heavenly court, literally overrule them, if his student is chas v'sholom sentenced to go to Gehenna, or worse. The tzaddik can take this student under his wing and say, he is mine, I will not allow him to enter into Gehenna. And the fact is that his is the last word. So again, we say that the judgment for Rishonim in Gehenna is 12 months. This is the first rabbi in the Mishnah who says this. And this means then that after he has fulfilled the items that precede Gehenna, then he goes to Gehenna for 12 months. This means to a Rasha who is destined to get to Gan Eden eventually. There are certain types of people who could never get to Gan Eden, chas v'sholom, certain types of sins which warrant a person staying in Gehenna eternally. So of course they are not included in this statement. This means, except in those cases that are permanent tenants in Gehenna, the evil person is sentenced to Gehenna for this period of 12 months. Those items that bring eternal suffering we discussed in the last Gemara Shiurim Sanhedrin. You recall, we went through those certain items, and basically they refer to emunah, faith. As, for example, to repeat one again, very vital one, to believe that every word of the Torah, and this too, this basic rule of faith, is the key to Gan Eden. Emunah that every word of the Torah, meaning not just the Chumash, every word of the Gemara is the word of Hashem. It is not the rabbis who wrote the Gemara, it is Hashem. Hashem gave the Gemara to Moshe Rabbeinu at Mount Sinai, and then later on it was stated orally by the rabbis of the Gemara. But every word they say is not their own words, it is the words of Hashem. There's one rabbi who argues this point and says that the judgment in Gehenna is not 12 months. In this case, this is an exception. The judgment is 7 weeks. Judgment of a Russia is 7 weeks, which means 49 days, because this coincides with the fact that there are 49 degrees of impurity. Just as there are 49 degrees of wisdom attainable, the 50th degree is the wisdom of Hashem, so too, contrarily, there are 49 degrees of tumah, impurity, and penalty for that is 49 days in Gehenna. 50th degree of impurity is the point of no return. And that's why you recall that there was such a hurry to get the Jews out of Egypt, because the Jews had descended into the 49th degree of tumah. They were on the verge of going to the 50th, so Hashem took them out of Egypt, the chipozo, flying hurry. There was no time to do anything, to save them from going to the 50th degree of tumah, and then to ascend, to emerge from this tumah. They counted the 49 days of Sphira, the Omer, which brought them up to the opposite of the 49 degrees of Kedusha. To finally get to Shavuos, the 50th day, when they receive the Torah itself, the word of Hashem. This is the debate as far as a neshama, a soul, going to Gehenna. Now, we note there's a special law in reference to this which pays to be aware of, because of the fact that there is a little controversy about this, and there are opinions in the Shulchan Aruch. It's good to know both sides. The person can judge for himself which side, if ever it becomes necessary to decide this. We hope, of course, it never becomes necessary. In case a parent passes away, chas v'shalom, we have the custom of the son saying Kaddish. The reason for the Kaddish is, according to many, to save, to alleviate, to ease the suffering of the parent during the judgment period in Gehenna. Now, since the judgment period in Gehenna, as the Mishnah says, is up to 12 months, therefore it would seem that the Kaddish should be said for a period of 12 months. However, the custom of the vast majority among religious Jews is that a son says Kaddish for a parent for 11 months. The reason stated near there is because he does not want to imply that his parent was a Russia, was so wicked he deserved a 12-month penalty. Therefore, hence we have the custom that his son says Kaddish for only 11 months, showing he's not accusing his parent of being that evil a person. This is the reason for the 11-month period of Kaddish. This is what the vast majority of people do. Kaddish is said for 11 months. However, for those who know, beyond this, the Arizal, Yaakov, says this is an error. A very sad error, because note that the Kaddish is not just said to save the neshama from the suffering in Gehenna. It is also said for the sake of elevating the neshama to a higher level of Gan Eden. The fact that the son says Kaddish is so beneficial to the soul of a parent that it helps the parent's soul to emerge from Gehenna, be saved from the punishment of Gehenna, and also to be promoted to advance the progress and the steps and elevation in Gan Eden. Therefore, we find that Arizal says proof. You have a parent who is a tzadik. Surely a tzadik, there's no question about this tzadik not having to go to Gehenna. Still, Kaddish is said for him. If it was only to save the parent from Gehenna, why say Kaddish for a parent who is a tzadik? That is proof, therefore, that it is said to help the parent to rise in Gan Eden. If we should say that this is no proof, because no one knows the inner heart or mind of a person, even this person is a tzadik, perhaps he did something privately that's so serious a sin that he has to have this 12-month period of suffering in Gehenna. Even if we should say that, at best, at least it is a doubt. So that there is a possibility, certainly, of many who do not deserve Gehenna, deserve punishment, and still Kaddish is said for everyone. Arizal says that since Kaddish is said also for the sake of advancing the neshama in Gan Eden, and since the first year is a year of judgment, and why deprive, why take away from a parent the privilege of being promoted during the last month of this judgment, the most important month? Why, when a parent needs this benefit most, the 12th month, suddenly the son stops saying Kaddish and the parent loses out? Therefore, the Arizal says that the true benefit to the neshama is to have the Kaddish said for an entire 12-month period, no matter what no matter what benefit it'll do, save from punishment or help to promote in Gan Eden. That's the Arizal's custom. There are some who follow that custom. And of course, as we said, this is up to each individual person, Chas v'shalom, if he's confronted with this problem, to decide for himself. However, logically, despite the fact that it is true that the vast majority of people have accepted the custom of 11 months, the fact is that logic would certainly dictate that Kaddish should be said for a period of 12 months to benefit the soul of parents. And this is very important advice. It's a pity that the advice is not followed by many. There are some, of course. Among ours, the custom is 12 months. Among the ones that I've seen, Kach Kibalti Merabesai, they're very much productive, particular about saying Kaddish for 12 months, because they know the effect. The Chachma So'emes, the truth is that it is that beneficial. So again, it's a word of advice and a word of hope that this problem will never arise. We should have Mashiach come, Yerushalmi, without having to witness this problem materialize. Well, we should have only simchas and only happiness. Above all, the moral lesson the Mishnah teaches us is that this 12-month period we speak about, a year, as far as judgment goes, the year itself corresponds to the Jews as a nation. Note the number 12 corresponds to the 12 tribes of Israel. The word for year is Shana. Shana is a year that's 355, which is the number of days in a full year, which means where you have the 2 months of Cheshvan and Kislev, full months, 30 days each. The Jewish year, lunar year, fluctuates between 353 and 355. But note that the word Shana is a number that corresponds to the actual days of the lunar year, the year of the moon. Solar year 2, 365 days, though it represents the sun, still that number is a very important number, a vital number, because this too represents the number of mitzvahs in the Torah, the negative mitzvahs, leisaseh, the ones you must abstain from. There are 248 positive mitzvahs, aseh, 365 negative ones, corresponding to these numbers of days. Because this represents the year of the Goyim, therefore the negative aspect of the mitzvah. Also, of course, this corresponds to the Sephiris, a separate topic in itself. The point, again, is that the Mishnah tells us about these items of mishpat, and the key to avoid all types of mishpat is emunah. that the Jew should strengthen himself with pure faith and thereby escape all types of judgment. He's to remain solidly tied to the tzadik emes, to the Torah, and to Hashem, to this emunah. And with that emunah, the Jews, as a nation, will escape judgment and will merit to see the judgment against the Goyim, against the 70 nations of earth, and finally we'll have the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu, Binyan Beis HaMikdash, and the rule by Hashem himself for the world from Heda. Amen. Amen. We continue the Shir in Gemara. You recall we're on the Masechta Edyos, Gemara Edyos, which speaks about the very select sayings of the rabbis of the Gemara who assembled on that day when the Elazar ben Azariah took over as Nasi, as chief rabbi of the Sanhedrin. A very special day in which a lot of dinim were resolved. We come now to a part of the Gemara Mishnah, which by coincidence we discussed just before the summer. You'll recognize most of this. At the same time, there's a lot to be added to it, a lot to be said about it. The Gemara says that Akavia ben Mahalalel, Kavya ben Mahalalel is one of the rabbis of the Gemara in the earliest stages. This goes back a few generations before that of the time when this incident took place, which means generations before Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Godel, Rabbi Zakkai, before Hillel. Kavya ben Mahalalel, the Gemara says, had a conflict, a debate, the machlekes, with the Chachamim. And that means the rabbis of the Gemara, the plurality, the majority, argued, held one way, and he alone argued against them. In this case, then, we have the general rule saying that we follow the laws of the majority. Hence, in this case, we have to say that the law was not like Akavya ben Mahalalel, no matter how great he was. Even if alone he was superior to any one of his adversaries in these arguments, still the din remained like the Chachamim. The Gemara says there were 4 items they argued about. The Gemara lists these 4. First one of the 4 was called the Seor Pekuda. Give you a light, take this in a light vein, briefly. The Gemara says that there is a din of Beheres. Beheres means a leprosy which makes a person tamei, impure. This Beheres, this type of leprosy, is tamei only when there are white hairs in the center of this. It's a stain in the skin, a whiteness. The skin turns white, snow white, and in the center of that stain there are white hairs, and then the person is tamei. If there are no white hairs, then the person is pure despite the leprosy. Now, there is a condition, though, that the white hairs must grow after the Beheres came, not before. If there were white hairs first, and then a stain formed around the white hairs, he is not tamei. It must be Beheres, Kodmo, L'Sei Lavan. Beheres must come before the white hairs. So we have a unique case here. A case where there was a Beheres, and then there were white hairs. This man was undoubtedly tamei. Then the Beheres was cured. The Beheres disappeared, this leprosy. Then, but the white hairs remained. So Seor Pekuda means that the Beheres left behind it a deposit. It left a deposit of 2 white hairs. Then the Beheres came back again. And when it came back again, we have a problem. The Baharis that came back, is it the same Baharis which was there before? If so, that means that the Baharis came before the white hairs, the person is Tameh, or it's a new Baharis, and those white hairs came before this Baharis, which makes the person Tahor pure. Got that? We hope. Now, in this case, then, Kavya ben Mahalalel states the person is Tameh because we consider the hairs as having come after the Baharis, because we judge by the first Baharis, not the second. This person is Tameh. The Chachamim say the person is Tahor. He is pure. He is not Tameh because the person will not be Tameh until new white hairs are formed in this Baharis. The first white hairs are not related to the new Baharis. This is the first one of the 4 items. Item 2. Item 2 is one that relates to every person who is married and who observes every Jew observes the laws of Nida. Laws of Nida are that if a woman sees dam, it means menstrual blood, she becomes a Nida, she becomes impure, and the word Nida means separation. Husband and wife are separated. Question is, though, what is meant by dam? Dam, blood, requires a certain color. A color is something which is in the red, pink, rose, wine color family. There is again a machlokes. What if this is dam yarod? That's gold color, shaded gold, deep gold. Again, Kavya says that the woman who sees this gold color is tummy. Why? Because we have a law stipulated in the Gemara Nida that keren karkum, that any color which is like the shine or the reflection of the karkum, which means the saffron, which comes from there's a plant called the karkum, a crocus plant. Those biologists know this. The crocus plant, which you can recognize by the fact that it has 3 stems, and each stem has 3 leaves. This is not related to the hadassah. Special crocus plant which has these 3 stems and 3 leaves, and we examine the middle stem. The middle leaf on that middle stem is a very deep yellow, but so deep a yellow that it tends towards pink. This we can understand very simply. We can understand now, if you're in the watch business, that there is such a thing as gold, yellow gold, and pink gold. How does pink come to gold? If you know about the color of gold in jewelry, there is a yellowish gold and a gold that tends towards pink. And this is the color of this crocus plant. So this reflection of the karkum is definitely tummy, definitely impure. The woman is a nida if she has that color. Kavya b'malala says that if she sees dam yorek, any deep yellow, she is tameh also. The Chachamim say absolutely not. Deep yellow is tahor, pure. That's the second one of the 4 arguments. The third one is the din of a behema, an animal that's first born, a bechor. The rule is that a behema that's born, any firstborn animal is considered holy and must be given to the Kohen. You give this to the Kohen. Can the Kohen eat this bechor? Definitely not. It is so holy even he cannot eat it. What does he do with it? He lets it graze until it develops a defect, a physical defect called a mum. Once that physical defect comes into the animal, a mum, then he is allowed to slaughter it and eat the meat. So a bechor, a firstborn animal, given to a Kohen, it is now the property of the Kohen. He too cannot eat it until the animal develops a mum, a defect, and then it is considered permissible to be eaten. But he may slaughter it, he may eat it. But the bechor remains holy. He is not allowed to work with it in the field. he is not allowed to shear the wool, the hair or the wool. Now, what happens after he slaughters it? Once he slaughters it, any wool that's on the body is permissible, naturally. It becomes his for anything. So the wool that's on the body after it is sheared is permissible. What if it shed hairs before he slaughtered it? The hairs that were shed before, we would say, are not permissible. But Kavya Amal says that it is permissible because it was going to be slaughtered anyhow. So we are not afraid that if we allow that hair that falls off to be used, then the person, the Kohen, would keep this palm wool and not slaughter it and save it so that the hair would keep on falling off and use it. In any event, the hair that comes off, or the wool that comes off, this animal before slaughtering, according to Kavya, is permissible. The Aharon say it's forbidden. It's the third one of the four arguments. These are three. The fourth one is the one that developed a big debate. We discussed this once. Well, let's say the sort of explosion, which brings us to this whole topic. Fourth one is the topic of a woman who commits adultery or who is suspected of adultery. When we had the Beis HaMikdash, a woman like that was called a soteh, one who commits adultery. So if she is suspected of it, how do we determine whether she's guilty or not? The Torah says the husband brings his wife to the Kohen Gadol in the Beis HaMikdash in the Holy Temple, and there the Kohen Gadol gets together a cup of water and earth from the earth of the Holy Temple. In it he places a piece of parchment on which is written the chapter of the Torah pertaining to Soteh. This chapter contains the name of Hashem, which gives this water miracle powers. The parchment is placed in the water, and the woman is made to drink this water. If she is innocent, no harm befalls her. She's proven innocent. If she is guilty of adultery, then her stomach bursts on the spot, she dies, and she has paid a price. This is the law of Soteh. And this rule applies to a woman who is Jewish. The question arises now, what if this woman is a Gioris, a convert? She was not born Jewish, but she is a convert. Does this same rule apply to her? Or a woman who was born a maid, a non-Jewish maid, and the rule is when you free a non-Jewish servant or maid, they automatically become a convert. So either a Gioris, a convert, or a maid who was freed, could she be given this water to drink or not? Akavi B'Malala says definitely not. You cannot give her this water to drink. It will not have any effect on her. This miracle works only for a Jewish woman, born a Jewish woman. The Chachamim say it does work for a Gioris and Shefcha too. There's a debate. So the Chachamim said to Akavi B'Malala, we have the present, just before us, the Siyam, the head chief rabbis of the Sanhedrin, the rabbis of Hillel, Shmaya and Avtalion, who actually performed an act of giving this water to drink to a maid, Carcamus. Carcamus was this maid's name. Some say it was the name of the city she came from. That was the name, this very famous name, where this famous case of this maid who was freed, that means she's a convert. She was given the water to drink by the two great leaders, Shmaya and Avtalion, who were the rabbis of Hillel and Shammai. Surely they were that holy and that learned and that authoritative that their action should decide the question. Akavi B'Malala answered, he replied, Dugma Hishkuha, which means the same as the maid, it seems, or the same, gave her this water to drink. And the same would mean that this maid was a convert. Well, they too were converts. In other words, they were converts also. That's why they wanted to show that they are as good as any other Jew. So they made this rule to show it. That's what it would seem, he said. In other words, dugma. They are like this maid, and it would seem as though he insulted them. Insulted such great leaders, such great luminaries. Of course, by the way, there's a question in general whether they were converts or not. Because some say, they use the word converts about Shemayin Avtayon. Others say, the Mashal says that it's impossible because they could not have been judges of Bezin. They must have been the sons of converts. They were called after their father's name. In any event, he used that term, dugma, which means a similar one gave this woman to drink, this convert, and therefore it doesn't prove anything. The Chachamim who heard this became furious and insulted the leading rabbis of Israel. That means they placed a heavenly curse on him, and this heavenly curse was not removed. When he passed away, they stoned his coffin because the curse remained after his death. This is what the Mishnah says. The Gemara says further, that's impossible. This story is an impossibility. We cannot accept this under any conditions, and the Gemara rejects this outright. Never say such a thing, because Kavya b'Mahalala was so holy that when the Jews went into the holy temple on a holiday, and the miracle where all the Jews fit into the yard of the holy temple, there were millions, multi-millions present there, great tzaddikim, imagine that generation, what great rabbis were there, all these millions. They had to take a head count, and everyone present, nobody there could compare to the greatness of Yaakov alone. He was the biggest tzaddik of all the entire assemblage. He was the tzaddik emes at that time. How can you say they put him in chaydim, for one thing? Besides which, how could you suspect so great a tzaddik to allow such a word on his lips to speak against Shemayin Avtayon? This couldn't have happened. You're very much mistaken in two things. Number one, when he said dugma, he meant to say that you have not proven your case. These two great tzaddikim, Shemayin Avtayon, gave this Edyos, this convert, the shivcha, water to drink, but dugma, they gave her water that was like the water. It wasn't real. They just did it. They pretended to give it that to frighten her into confessing. They gave her a clefus parchment with words on it. They pretended it was those words that Hashem's name was on it. It wasn't. So this was only a pretense to get her to confess, but they did not do it because you cannot give a convert this water to drink. That's what he said. There was no insult intended, no insult at all that occurred. So why then was there a statement about putting him in chayr and so forth? The Gemara says you got the whole story wrong. There was somebody else who committed a crime. Some person by the name of Elazar ben Chanoch, who committed a crime of making a mockery of one of the important mitzvahs of the Torah, washing hands before bread, or washing hands in the morning. And because he mocked this mitzvah, which is a mitzvah of the Rabbanon, rabbinical decree, therefore he was put in chayrim, because anybody who mocks the laws of the rabbis is put in chayrim. When he died, they stoned his coffin. He died in this chayrim. This is what the Mishnah tells us here. And of course, the Gemara says, after this occurred, we got to the true point that Yaakov was so great a tzaddik, and he stood steadfast in the argument in these four cases. He refused to submit to them. But they are a majority. He claimed, you're not a majority, and I'm not an individual, because kach kibalti me'rabosai. I am not speaking on my own behalf. I have received this from my mentors previously, and compared to you, they are a majority. They are greater than you in number and in knowledge, and therefore I refuse to concede these cases. So throughout his lifetime, he maintained that the law was like he said. The Gemara says that they said to him, there are people who follow him because they have such respect, and it hurts, it harms the atmosphere. They said to him, we'll make you an offer. If you retract your statement on these four items, we will elect you as the chief rabbi of the court, the Av Bezdin. It's a mighty big offer. Kavya answered, that offer I refuse on the grounds of, and he said these immortal words, which we've mentioned many times and which we should engrave in our memory. He said, I would rather be called a fool all my life. A fool for what? A fool for refusing the offer. A fool for maintaining my opinion against the entire world. All my life to be considered a fool. But I should not be considered chas v'shalom a rasha, evil in the eyes of Hashem, for one single moment. If I accept this sort of bribe, I've committed a crime. I refuse to do something which is wrong, even for a moment. It's worth better being a fool in the eyes of the people. And this, of course, is the statement that every person should experience in life. This applies to every person when it comes to arguments about faith. When anybody who is irreligious, or doesn't have a feeling, a spark of faith in his heart, and mocks a Jew who has faith, a Jew whom he calls a fool because he possesses blind faith, the Jew's reply should always be, call me a fool my entire life because I have this blind faith, but I should not come before Hashem and there be accused of having been an atheist, chas v'shalom. So it's worth being called a fool when I come pure before Hashem. Now, what do you mean by one moment? Not to be called a rasha for one moment. Because despite the fact that he would take this bribe, it would be only for a moment. Once a person is appointed a chief rabbi, the Gemara says all his sins are forgiven. But from the time he accepts the bribe to the appointment, there's that short period of time, will be considered a rasha. He refuses even that short period of time to be considered a rasha. More important, of course, Arizal says that we have this idea of being a rasha for a moment. It can be a long moment or a short moment. How does one avoid being a rasha for shor achas, 1 hour? Shor means an hour. 1 hour being a rasha before Hashem can be erased. Arizal says that erased by that advice he gave, 1 hour of his prejudice. Arizal advised that every Jew should have an hour of his prejudice each day, an hour of private tefillah with Hashem. The hour, if possible. If it's impossible, then less than an hour, a moment, a period of time, but each day. This was Arizal's legacy to every one of his followers. Every single day without fail, you must go into a private chamber, no matter where it is. It could be a private room, it could be in a forest, it could be underneath your bed covers. Enclose yourself privately with Hashem. Speak to Hashem privately, pour out your heart to Hashem. Tell him your problems, ask Hashem to help you. Do not be ashamed to speak to Hashem no matter how trivial the matter is. As an example, he once said to his main disciple, Rosenfeld, you need a new pair of shoes. It's so unimportant an item. Don't be too proud to ask Hashem for it. You haven't got the money for a pair of shoes. You have a problem, speak to the best friend you can ever get. Hashem, who is so high, who is so almighty, and yet who is always ready instantaneously to listen to your words. You don't need a special appointment. Hashem is the greatest doctor that exists. There's no appointment with this doctor necessary. Any moment, day or night, in the 24 hours, you speak to Hashem, there is instantaneous reaction, listening intently to what you want. Of course, the response depends upon the sincerity of your tefillah. But if you find that you have davened to Hashem, you have not been answered, the way you want to, then know that your tefillah has not been rejected. Every word is stored in heaven. It's accepted, and when Hashem knows the time is ready, your tefillah will be answered. But not one single word ever goes lost. Not one single word wanders astray. It's all saved up in heaven, and every word is accepted with goodwill by Hashem. No matter how far you think you have wandered from Hashem, no matter how much wrong you've done, no matter how much you have sinned, you're still wanted and liked and desired by Hashem. The Edyos says, every day, come before Hashem, even if today is worse than yesterday. You did more sins than yesterday. Instead of improving, go back to Hashem again. You have another problem, bring it before Hashem, ask for His assistance. This is the Shah Achas, 1 hour, 1 moment that will counteract being a Rasha before Hashem. Be a tzadik before Hashem with this our time of spenders. In addition, of course, as the Zohar Kodesh says, this Shah Achas means the complete purity of the whole kaima, the whole personage. Every person consists of the 10 spheres of the Gimel Elyonim, the 3 mental, the 7 physical. 7 physical consists of 6 and 1, and that's the actually 7 and 1. It ties it up into 7. It works by hundreds, by tens, and then the so-called Malchus. Shor, Shin, 300, that's the Gimel Elyonim. Ayin is the Sayin Tachtenim, and the He is the Malchus. We won't go into the details of that. We've had that many times, but it's just a hint to what Aharon Malala said. In showing his Zohar Kodesh says that every word that is in the Gemara, every word in the Gemara is like learning Kabbalah, if you know how to recognize these words. Now, this was the debate between them, and Arizal says, let's go a little deeper into this story. Well, let's at least examine what is the story behind the story. Whom are we speaking about? Kavya ben Mahalalel, who admittedly was the greatest tzaddik alive. Note that the wording about him is that he was so great that when the yard of the Holy Temple, the gate was locked, and in Edyos it was locked on all the Jews, he was the greatest in wisdom and in religion. And the gate was locked. Why use that term, locked? You know. Arizal says, in the words of the Gemara, we find a lot of depth. To go into this depth, we take the background of Kavya ben Mahalala. We know that all of these souls that were created during the time of creation. With the creation of Adam Harishon, Adam and Eve, they were then created all the future souls that were to live. They were divided, though, into 2 parts, the Cain and Hevel. Cain, the elder, Hevel, the younger one. What transpired afterwards is a separate item. Hevel is the right side, the chasadim, the kindness. Cain is the din, the left side, the harshness, just as we have in heaven, Hashem Elokim, Hashem Chesed, Elokim Din. Now these 2, from Cain and Hevel, came forth all the future souls, but they required perfecting. They were not created with a completion at the time, and then the world would come to an end. There's a lot to perfect, a lot of necessary mending, perfecting, elevating, progressing, because there'd be no world if Hashem Himself created the world to perfection, and that's it. The world is perfect when you have a choice, when you have mitzvahs. Mitzvahs means a choice to do a mitzvah or a sin. When the Jew decides upon a mitzvah, he overcomes his evil desire, he is doing, he's accomplishing. If he does it like a robot, without any choice, that's not actually serving Hashem. So we have this case of Cain and Hevel, who required perfecting the neshamos, the souls that were based in them. There were certain ones who were outstanding. You have a chief rabbi, you have a tzadik. He's an outstanding soul. He's more part of the entire base creation of Cain or Hevel than others. For example, the soul that covers all the souls that came from Hevel was afterwards Shem, the base main son of Noah, who came forth Shem. All the Jews came from Shem. And then the main one afterwards was Moshe Rabbeinu, who was equivalent to all 600,000 basic neshama souls of the Jews. This shows the chain, the continuity. That's why he was called Moshe Rabbeinu, because he was the Gilgul, reincarnation of these three. Mem Shin He is Hevel, Shem, Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu, who came from Shem, who came from Hevel. Now, as far as Cain is concerned, there was much more perfecting to do. The Arizal says, we note, that with the passing of Cain and Hevel, we see that it seems nothing was accomplished, because Hevel was killed, Cain had to pay for it, he too was wiped out. So then we say that the world came from Shes, Bereshis, or Shes, the third son of Adam. From him came forth the world, the Menahushta Salem, Shes, Enosh, his son, and then came Canaan, Mahalalel. Canaan, Cain Nun, perfecting Cain, Mahalalel, the son of Canaan. There is a relation between Mahalalel and Canaan, which means that Mahalalel, the son of Canaan, was a derivation of Canaan, who was a rebirth of Cain. Arizal says, let's follow that family lineage now in the correct perspective. What was Cain's greatness? He was the Bechor, firstborn, which means that to him rightfully belonged the kingdom. He should have been king of all mankind, and the firstborn is the Kohen Gadol. So to him belonged the kingdom and the kahuna. You find this stated very clearly. Yaakov Avinu spoke to his sons. He said to his first son Reuven, Yeser Se'es, Yeser Oz. What does that mean? You should have. You were born first. You should have had Se'es, Kohen Gadol. You should have been the Kohen. Oz, you should have been the Melech, the king. You lost it because of an act you did with Bilhah. Firstborn, to him belongs the kingdom and the kahuna. So this belonged to Cain. This had to be perfected. He couldn't keep it himself. Later on, what happened? We have Canaan and Mahalalel. Finally, we find that the kingdom was finally perfected through Cheskia. Cheskia HaMelech was a direct Gilgul, follow carefully, Gilgul of Cain, and here Cain got the Malchus which originally belonged to him. Cheskia, the king, who was so great that Hashem himself wanted to declare Cheskia Moshiach. Moshiach, who is actually the derivative of Adam, the son of Adam. The son of Adam is Cain. Adam stands for Adam, Aleph, Dalet, Mem, Adam, David, Mashiach. So Hashem said, Kaviyachal, Hashem himself said, Cheskia, who is the son of Adam, he is Cain, take over the kingdom and even to be king and Mashiach. The time was not right, it was postponed. But we do find Cheskia Melech was Mashiach, was king. Cain received the kingdom in the form of Cheskia Melech. Later on, again, he came back as a Gilgul. Again and again, he came back later, the Arizal says, as Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu, the Chiyashav Avos. Why? We come to this word because in Cain itself, which means this whole structure of souls, which part of that structure was the most important? Was it the head? Of course, the head is more important than the foot. But in a sense, the foot is most important. Not the foot, but the soul of the foot, the very bottom. Because if one who is on the bottom can work, can strive, can elevate himself, can dedicate himself to a lifetime of devotion and service, and rise from the bottom, reach the top, that's the greatest accomplishment possible. That is a true tzadik, not one who takes it by birth. Yaakov Avinu worked, he strived, he stayed up nights, 20 years. He fought against Lavan, against Esav. The Akev Esav, Yaakov comes from the word Akav, which means the soul. His neshama came from the bottom. But he rose so high up that he even bypassed the first two of the fathers of the Jews. He was the chosen one of the fathers of the Jews because he started from the bottom, rose up to the top. Yaakov. The same thing. Again, this was still Cain being perfected. The Akav, the soul of Cain. He came back again later as we said, Cheskia HaMelech, for the kingdom, and then as Akavia ben Mahalalel. Akavia Akav. Same Akav. Ben Mahalalel, the son of Mahalalel, the son of Canaan. He's not for, by coincidence, is he called Akavia ben Mahalalel. This Akavia was the tzadik, was the holiest son, because he was combination of this Akav of Cain, and most important, the Gilgal of Yaakov Avinu and Cheskia HaMelech. And then from him, the next step was, he did not get, because he sacrificed himself, did not take the office of chief rabbi. The next step was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Yochanan ben Zakkai was the Nasi. He was the Nasi, the chief rabbi of the Sanhedrin. And the Arizal says, note, there is a machlokus for those who know. The Gemara we find, the Gemara in Shabbos, in Ashar Kodesh, in Shabbos of Lamadalat, says that Yochanan ben Zakkai was the Kohen Gadol. Teshuva and Menachem says that he was not a Kohen. Arizal says, like in Ashar Kodesh, in Menachem Kodesh, he was the Kohen Gadol because in Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Cain finally got to the Kahuna Gedolah. We have further proof that there was a combination there. Note how powerful this joined up. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, the Gemara says, the day of his passing, the day of the stalkers, he said to his Talmidim, I'm about to pass away. Leave an empty chair, because I have a visitor here. What does the Gemara say? I have a visitor, Cheskia HaMelech, came to visit me. Join with me the kingdom and the Malchus. Se'es v'ois, Guna and Malchus. Then, afterwards, the final step, to match the perfections, Cain's perfection, to be like Hevel's, the next step was Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva is exactly the same letters as Akavia. Akavia turned around, it's very similar is Rabbi Akiva. He was the match to Moshe Rabbeinu in wisdom, and this was the perfection of Cain up to and including Rabbi Akiva. Of course, this goes further. There's a long list of subsequent names, but these are the main ones. And from here we see the importance of Akavia ben Mahalalel, who he really was. Therefore, we can understand when the Gemara uses that lashon, just one word, to tell us one single word, and this word, for ordinary people like us, it means the story itself. For those who know, it's a hint. Know the entire story behind the story. That when the Azara was locked, Azara nin elis, Na'al means the shoe, the foot, the Akav, that shoe, speaking about the soul of Cain, bottom part from which came forth all those with the name of Akav, Akavia, Akiva, Yaakov, all those, the Zohar was closed, and this time he was the one that contained all the neshamos completely of that side. This was the greatness of Akavia ben Mahalalel, and therefore the maskana, which means the final word is that naturally it's impossible, chas v'shalom, to say that such a story occurred, that the rabbis would say to him, Chayer, for speaking against Shmai and Avtaya, and surely his outstanding characteristic was respect for greatness. So he surely had respect for Shmai and Avtaya. What then was the crime committed? There was a story about a Chayer stoning a coffin. This was the case of Elazar ben Chanoch. The Gemara says that he belittled the mitzvah of washing hands. And therefore, because he belittled the mitzvah of the rabbis of the Gemara, They put him in a chayr of a heavenly curse. They stoned his coffin. Note how remarkably we find that this was so long ago. And this deserved a chayr because he belittled a mitzvah. Arizal said, you recall, we had this in Sichas Haran. There will come a time when there will be a decline in religion to such an extent that people will be so irreligious that a Jew will perform the simple mitzvah of washing his hands will be considered the tzadik. We have this in relation to the story. How does it fit in? We speak first of the tzadik emes, then about the opposite, the Elazar who didn't wash his hands and is considered the very opposite. There will come a time when a person who will just wash his hands will be considered a chiddush, great as the Baal Shem Tov in his time. Because the washing of the hands is the symbol of purity. Remember that Arizal says the greatest tefillah a person can have is that he can shed tears. Gates of tefillah may be closed in heaven, but the gates of tears are always open. A person can shed tears while davening, and take those tears, those warm, fresh tears, and wash his forehead where the sins are engraved. Let it show, and wash his hands to purify his hands with those tears. That person washes himself clean of sins. Therefore, they stress, in this case, of the sin of Elazar ben Chanoch, belittling this mitzvah of washing hands, which is so great, that this is the symbol of Torah, symbol of purity of the heart, symbol of purity of the mind, symbol of cleansing oneself completely from sin. This is the story of Akavi Malala. The Gemara says further, very briefly, that at the time of his passing, he called his son into him, and he said to his son, my son, I ask you to retract. Go back. Retract on these 4 items, which I said, now on, do not listen to me, except the words of the rabbis. Because you've got to go to the right side, go to what they say. And the son asked, but father, if it is so, why didn't you retract your words? Why did you remain solidly with your opinion? Why didn't you give in then? If you say I should, why didn't you? Akavia answered, I knew what I was doing. The law, no matter what anyone says, the law is you must follow the majority. I had a majority to follow because I had rabbis who were a majority. You had only me to follow. You didn't have my rabbis. Your one rabbi was me, against the word of the present chachamim plural. Therefore, very simply, logically, you've got to follow your majority, which is the chachamim. Of course, this was clear, and his son gave in, submitted, conceded to this. And then the son said, Father, before you pass away, please help me and speak to my friends, my colleagues, that they should treat me well. I want to be sure that I won't be mistreated, maltreated, and I'd be accorded at least an equal status with them. And Tavia answered that I refused to do so. And the son asked, Father, did you see me commit any wrong? Have I done something wrong that I don't deserve this help from you? His father said, no, you've done nothing wrong, but I want you to learn to stand on your own feet. Meaning that you should perform your own mitzvos. If you do good in mitzvos and in midos, good qualities of character, your own deeds will bring you closer to your friends and will give you respect. If you do the wrong kind of deeds, the wrong kind of actions in character or mitzvos, it will estrange you not only from Hashem but from your friends too. So learn that the key to success in everything, spiritually and materially, is through your actions, through your own accomplishments, and through your own purity. Ma'asim tovim, good deeds, midos tovos, good qualities of character, can bring a person the greatest kavod, the greatest honor, from above and below. This was the lesson finally taught by Kadim Malala to his son. And in this story, once again, the main stress is on the point of emunah tzadikim, to believe implicitly in the words of tzaddikim, in the greatness of tzaddikim. Note how the Gemara stressed the point that it's impossible for one who is greater even to say a word derogatorily against, degradingly against any chacham, any Talmud chacham, any learned person. The respect that is due to the Torah, to the B'nai Torah, to the Chachamim, accept the words of these rabbis if they say about washing hands or anything else, accept these words as the words of Hashem. With this kind of emunah, this kind of acceptance, we can be sure of receiving shortly the presence of Mashiach Tzidkenu and witnessing the rebuilding of the Beis Hamikdash. Amen. Amen.